who has participated a lot, even though she's in Connecticut. So welcome, Tiffany Wilgar.
Hi.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hello.
Hi. This is so much fun.
Yeah, it's been great so far. And yeah, thank you so much for being part of it.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Mm-hmm.
What part of the world did you say she's in?
I'm in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so way over there.
Yeah, it's been snowing all week, so there's.
Oh no! Don't bring that here. Don't bring it here. We might get snow just by talking to you right now. Oh, no.
Yeah. We're especially what's going on in Texas. Very happy about our weather right now. We don't need it. Like we would be just like Texas if that happened here because we are not prepared for it either. Just
You're right.
Yeah.
I have more shorts than pants.
Yeah. All right, Tiffany. Tell us about your reading. This is an author actually you introduced me to, which I'm very grateful for.
Did I? Oh, that makes me happy. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to read from Ijeoma Oluo's So You Want to Talk About Race? I'm going to read the chapter.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, I'm going to read the chapter about intersectionality because I think it's really good. And I've been a fan of hers for a really long time. She's done some really excellent interviews and just some other sort of writing online even before she published this book in 2018. And I was a fan of hers way back when. And I've had my students read this book and talk about it because like David, I'm a professor of rhetoric and writing. And so I use this book to talk about, rhetorics of race.
Wow. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, high recommend for anything that she's ever done.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Now I'm all excited.
Yeah, this is a really great book for, if you need to talk to especially your white friends about race, like an introduction to it. I think she's really great for that. I
might have to Amazon some people.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tiffany, take it away.
Stage is all yours.
All right, great. I just have a hard copy, unlike everybody else. All right. What is intersectionality and why do I need it? I am so sorry, I said, as my phone buzzed again. Can you excuse me for a minute? I have this thing I need to take care of with my kids really quick. My dinner companion graciously nodded in reply, and I rushed upstairs to my hotel room to my laptop. Come on, I said to myself as I tried to quickly run the online program. I knew that every minute this took made me more and more rude and more of a liar. No, there was no issue with my kids. And yes, it's pretty shitty to use them as an excuse, but hey, consider it a rare indulgence for a single parent. But I was damned if I was going to say, sorry, I have to leave our dinner to go run a program to block thousands of Twitter trolls who think I hate Black men before this shit goes viral and I can never use Twitter again. There's no rescuing dinner after that. It started quietly enough weeks earlier. I had found out that a famous Black male musician was coming to town to perform. This musician, who shall remain nameless, was long believed by many, including myself, to be a sexual predator of multiple young Black women and teenage girls. How could a man so notorious for suspicion of such heinous offenses sell out an arena in liberal Seattle? How was this man still rich and famous? I tweeted out some of my frustration, expressing the desire that, if he'd ever see jail time due to a society that did not value Black womanhood, he would at least be forever reminded of his misdeeds in any venture he tried to undertake. Plus a lot of swear words. I was angry. I really care about the plight of Black women and girls. The tweets got some likes and a few retweets, but as I said, society doesn't really value Black womanhood, and the conversation didn't gain much traction. That is until Hotep Twitter found a hold of my tweets. To Hotep Twitter, think Black men's rights activists with the added fun of wildly inaccurate Egyptian origin mythology on Twitter. The fact that I would use so many swear words on a Black man accused of assaulting multiple Black women led them to one conclusion. I hated Black men. Not only did I hate Black men, but I was on the side of the lynch mobs, on the side of the school-to-prison pipeline. I was the house Negro, the high yellow bed wench who'd spread her legs for her white master. For real, these are words that have been sent to me. And before I knew what was happening, I had thousands of angry Black men and some Black women interrupting my dinner with buzzes on my phone notifying me that they were working as hard as possible to drown my Twitter feed in hatred. To those clamoring to send me hateful messages. I had betrayed Black people with my comments against a Black musician. I had taken the side of white oppressors by speaking so publicly about a Black man's crimes. But this is because their idea of Blackness and the oppressions that Black people face did not include Black women and the specific oppressions we face from being both Black and women. While they were fighting to defend this Black man, they were giving little thought to his Black female victims or the other Black women who may have been harmed by seeing someone so widely known for harming Black women lauded so publicly. This sort of hurtful denial of the various oppressions that I and many others have to navigate is something I'm often forced to confront in office meetings, in social justice forums, in feminist activist groups, in government and social programs aimed at fighting inequality, and most often on the internet. I'd seen the consequences of this sort of anger at people who demanded that their various identities be taken into account when discussing larger social groups. And I'd seen how quickly this anger can turn into a full-scale online mob. I'd seen how these campaigns of harassment can take on a life of their own, lasting weeks, months, even years. I knew that it could lead to doxing campaigns where angry internet vigilantes publish your home address and work info into the masses. I knew that there was a limited amount of time to contain this problem before there would be no saving my online presence, and I'd have to leave my Twitter account for dead. Twitter may seem like many to be a frivolous thing to panic over, but this is not just a fun online community for me. Twitter is a huge part of my job. As a Black woman, it's very hard to build a platform for your writing in a white, male-dominated industry that shows little interest in giving Black women regular columns or placing them behind a news anchor's desk. Twitter is a huge tool in finding and maintaining my audience, and it is how many editors who want to commission the work of women of color find me. I simply cannot afford to be pushed off that platform. I scrambled to block as many of these attackers as I could in an attempt to stem this assault in as much time as I felt I could be away without worrying my very patient dinner companion too much or making her feel abandoned. Then I closed my laptop, said an atheist prayer for the best, and went back downstairs to apologize and finish dinner. By the next day, the uproar had mostly died down. I'd been able to cut off access to my account to a large number of Twitter users that online investigators were hoping to send to my page to harass me. When the return on troll investment, the barrage of hate met with my frantic pleas and denials had proved underwhelming. The bullies had moved on. I breathed a sigh of relief at the crisis averted. But then I was almost as quickly overcome with sadness. All I had done was express anger at the abuse of Black women. All I had done was ask people to care about us as they did about others. All I had done was ask for the fight for Black lives to include Black women too, and that I had to block tens of thousands of Black people, my people, who wanted me to pay for my audacity. And I, like many other prominent Black women on social media, felt very alone and very abused, because in our struggle for social justice and equality, we are often exploited and discarded. White women will heap praise on my words, calling for the destruction of the patriarchy, and then turn around and ask why I had to be so decisive or say dismissively that I sound like Al Sharpton when I dare to bring up race. Black men will follow me by the dozens after each essay I write, calling me out on white supremacy, but will forget all of that and call me a feminist tool of slave masters when I demand that Black women be treated with respect and dignity by everyone, even Black men. And even though Black Lives Matter was founded by Black women, and even though Black women have been at the heart of every feminist movement in this country's history, nobody marches for us when we are raped, when we are killed, and we are denied equal work for equal pay. Nobody marches for us. Intersectionality, the belief that our social justice movements must consider all of the intersections of identity, privilege, and oppression that people face in order to be just and effective, is the number one requirement of all the work that I do. When I first learned about intersectionality in college, I honestly had no idea what a huge part of my life it would later become. What was first an interesting, if not abstract, theory I wrote about for college papers became a matter of my political, social, spiritual, and yes, even physical survival. Because I am not capable of cutting myself into pieces. I am not capable of cutting away my blackness in order to support feminism that views the needs of women of color are divisive inconveniences. I am not capable of cutting away my womanhood in order to stand by Black men who prey on Black women. I am a Black woman. And every minute of every day, and I need you to march for me too. While this book is about race, I'm sure you know that we as people are far more than just our race. But even further, our experience of race is shaped by far more than just our skin color and hair texture. And just as racial identity is not the only type of identity in our society, racial oppression is not the only form of oppression in our society. Racial privilege is not the only form of privilege in our society. Each of us has a myriad of identities, our gender, class, race, sexuality, and so much more that inform our experiences in life and our interactions with the world. As we saw when we were checking our privilege, that's referring to an earlier chapter, the difficult hierarchies, privileges, and oppressions assigned to these different identities affect our lives in many ways. These privileges and oppressions do not exist in a vacuum, however, and can combine with each other, compound each other, mitigate each other, and contradict each other. We walk through the world with all of our identities at once, and therefore, our day has an endless number of possible combinations of outcomes depending on how individual events and situations we encounter interact with our individual identities. I am a Black queer woman. If I'm harassed on the street, I don't know if it's because I'm Black, if it's because I'm a woman, or if it's because I'm queer. In fact, it may be all three reasons at once. But many of our social justice movements would fail to consider the ways in which our multiple identities interact or intersect. For example, when feminist groups are discussing how to fight the street harassment of women. As a Black, queer, middle-class woman, my queer identity may often be overlooked by anti-racist or feminist movements. My female identity may be overlooked by anti-racist or queer movements. My Black identity may be overlooked by feminist or queer movements, and my middle-class identity may well cause me to overlook poor people in all movements. And when that happens, none of them can really help me or many others. This is very often the case in our movements and our society at large. Feminist movements, for example, often fail to consider the different needs and challenges that many women of color face and how they differ from what white women face. I've done a fair amount of work in support of reproductive rights, and I'm still surprised at how often reproductive rights groups claim they are fighting for reproductive rights for all women, yet consistently ignore the documented racial bias in the medical field that keeps many women of color from accessing reproductive health care, regardless of law. How does this happen? How does our social justice efforts often fail to help the most vulnerable in our populations? This is primarily a result of unexamined privilege. Because of how rarely our privilege is examined, even our social justice movements will tend to focus on the most privileged and the most well-represented people in those groups. Anti-racism groups will often tend to prioritize the needs of straight men of color. Feminist groups tend to prioritize the needs of white women, and LGBT groups will tend to prioritize the needs of gay, white, cisgender men. Disability rights groups will often tend to prioritize the needs of disabled white men. Imagine where this leaves a disabled Latinx trans woman on any group's list of priorities. Because the needs of the most privileged are usually the ones most prioritized, they are the only ones considered when discussing solutions to oppression and inequality. These solutions, not surprisingly, often leave the underprivileged populations in our movements behind. The idea of intersectionality provides a more inclusive and alternative to the status quo. Coined by the brilliant race theorist and civil rights activist Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989, the term intersectionality was born from Crenshaw's work to shed light on the ways in which the experiences in both race and gender intertwine to uniquely impact the lives of Black women and women of color. Crenshaw referred to those intersections of race and gender as intersectionality and stressed the need to consider intersectionality in our social justice movements. Intersectionality is a theory and practice, was quickly added by prominent Black feminists to describe the need they saw for a more holistic view of race and gender. From there, intersectionality spread to a large section of feminist scholarship and activism, and was expanded to include class, ability, and sexuality as well. Intersectionality And the necessity of considering intersectionality applies to more than just our social justice efforts. Our government, our education system, economic system, and social systems all should consider intersectionality if they have any hope of effectively serving the public. Intersectionality helps ensure that fewer people are left behind and that our efforts to do better for some do not make things worse for others. Intersectionality helps us stay true to our values of justice and equality by helping to keep our privilege from getting in our own way. Intersectionality makes our systems more effective and more fair. So if intersectionality makes all of our social justice efforts so much better, then why isn't it a more prominent part of our social justice movements? I believe there are many reasons that why social justice movements have been slow to adopt intersectional practices. And then from here is like a bullet pointed list. So I'm just going to read the list. Intersectionality slows things down. It's the simple truth. You often hear people say things like, well, let's just work on what the majority needs first and we'll get to the rest later. Intersectionality brings people face to face with their own privilege. Intersectionality decentralizes people who are used to being the primary focus of movements they are a part of. Intersectionality forces people to interact with, listen to, and consider people they don't normally interact with, listen to, or consider. These challenges to intersectionality are not easy to overcome, but it's worth the effort. I strongly believe that the vast majority of people who set out to fight racism, sexism, ableism, and other forms of oppression do so because they really do want to make the world a better place for all people. But if you don't embrace intersectionality, even if you make progress for some, you will look around one day and find that you've become the oppressor of others. So how do you increase the intersectionality in your discussions of race? Here are some questions you can ask yourself. And again, it's a list because this book is very practical. How might race, gender, sexuality, ability, class, or sex impact this subject? You don't have to have the exact answers to this question, but asking it of yourself will give you ideas from other viewpoints to seek out. Could the identity differences between me and the person I'm talking with about race be contributing to our differences of opinion or perspective? Are the people in my racial justice conversations and the opinions being considered truly representing the diversity of identities that interact with the subject matter being discussed? Does my scholarship of racial justice reflect that diversity of identities impacted by racial oppression? Like, whose books and articles am I using to inform my opinions? Am I listening to people whose identities and experiences differ from my own? Am I looking for what I don't know? Am I shifting some focus of power away from the most privileged in the conversation? Am I providing a safe space for marginalized people to speak out? It's not enough for you to personally believe in intersectionality. We need to start demanding intersectionality of all those who seek to join in the social justice movements. If you want to call attention to the need for a greater focus on intersectionality in your discussions of race and racial justice efforts, here are some things to remember. And again, it's a list. Most people don't know what intersectionality is, and unknown words can put people on the defensive. You may need to explain further with examples in order to put this into practice. It's often best to start first with real life examples of how this conversation or project could be more intersectional. The concept of intersectionality is more easily understood when viewed as an opportunity to do better and to do more instead of just an examination of the ways in which these efforts are failing. Intersectionality is absolutely always important to all discussions of race and social justice. Do not let other people bully you out of prioritizing it. Remember, while embracing intersectionality is vital for our efforts of fighting racism and other oppression, it applies to all aspects of our lives, not just to our movements. Who gets to speak at company meetings? For whom do you vote? How is your child's school curriculum developed? Who is considered when developing environmental policy? Everything we do publicly can be more inclusive and uplifting with intersectionality, and everything we do can become exclusionary and oppressive without it. Intersectionality and the recognition and confrontation of our privilege can make us better people with better lives.
All right, great.
Did you like it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, with everything we were talking about with the earlier readings, I mean, I think we definitely needed to talk about intersectionality at some point tonight. I think that summed up a lot of what we've already been talking about earlier.
Sounds like I need to get a book.
Yeah, actually, Evelyn in the comments said the same thing. So I think we made a few sales today, which is good.